evening. You're watching The Big Story with Harian Sudirman. I'm Olivia Quay. Before we go on, if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the Straits Times channel if you haven't already done so.
We begin with China and South Korea, two countries largely seen as success stories in combating COVID-19. But they're finding out that winning the earlier battles doesn't mean that they will win the war.
And that's because as they ease up restrictions to bring back some normalcy to life, they are being threatened by another wave of new infections.
South Korea reported 35 new cases earlier today. It's the second straight day that its daily count was above 30 for the first time in a month. Many of its recent cases were tied to nightclubs, which welcomed hundreds of people after reopening. Authorities have subsequently ordered the closing of its nightlife establishments. Meanwhile, Wuhan today reported its first cluster since a lockdown was lifted a month ago. It confirmed 5 new cases, all of whom live in the same residential compound.
So let's bring China correspondent Elizabeth Law in on this discussion. So Liz, China has previously seen new outbreaks of COVID-19, for example, in border provinces like Heilongjiang, which has seen a wave of infections from people crossing over its border with Russia. So how have the authorities responded to this resurgence?
Right. Hi, Ollie. Hi, Jan. So what the authorities have actually said when these new cases came out was that because there wasn't sufficient control at the border with Russia, and that the fact that Heilongjiang didn't have enough medical resources to be able to manage the entire situation. So what has happened in the last few weeks as infections started to spike over there is that they've tightened border controls at the border of Russia, and also medical reinforcement teams have been sent to Heilongjiang. Of course, local officials have also been removed for failing in their duties as is put in government parlance here. But it's not just the northern border with Russia that is of concern as well, because don't forget, China is a massive country and it shares a border. Yunnan shares a very large border with several countries in Southeast Asia, and that is very, very porous. So that southern border is another area that they're very concerned about as well. So they've been running drills to make sure that there are no illegal entries, and also they've been reinforcing medical teams and customs control over in the south.
Now that said, Liz, could we see another lockdown?
I would say I think it's very unlikely that that will happen, simply because the economic cost would just be far too much to bear. And don't forget, look at all signs are pointing to the fact that China is really reopening up, albeit very carefully. Next week, we're going to see the 2 sessions of parliament, which is where delegates from all over China are going to descend upon Beijing for the annual parliamentary meeting. And that is very significant. So the fact that that is happening means that the Chinese authorities are very confident that the entire situation is under control. And don't forget, just 2 months of partial lockdown across the country, a stricter lockdown in Hubei and Wuhan, and look at the sort of economic fallout that we're seeing now. So if China were to go into and it's just starting to recover. So if China were to go into another economic lockdown, I think, I beg your pardon, if they were to go into another proper lockdown, the economic impact is going to be devastating, and I don't think anybody wants to see that.
Right. Well, tensions, looking at the bigger picture, tensions between the US and China appear to be reaching a new high, especially with the Trump administration trying to pin the blame of the outbreak on Beijing. So what does this mean for bilateral relations between the US and China and the ongoing trade war?
Well, so it appears that throughout COVID, because let's just bring us all back to January 15, 16, where this phase 1 of the treaty was signed, and everyone thought that we are all fine now, that this trade war is now going to see a sort of détente and things are going to get better. And then as the COVID situation unfolded in China and across the world, things started to get a bit more tense. And now with the situation getting quite out of control in the US. Clearly, authorities are looking towards somewhere to point to blame. We thought that tensions were really going to reach a head, but last week we saw that Vice Premier Liu He and his American counterparts, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and USTR Lighthizer, had a phone call to talk about how they would now have more cooperation in public health as well as economic cooperation. So it's really hard to say where it will go, but it's clear that there are people within the administration trying to keep things going, because don't forget, no matter what their political leanings, these are the two biggest economies in the world, and if they are at the head, the entire world suffers. And with COVID already causing so much of economic problem, you really don't want this sort of bilateral tensions to lead to even more economic devastation.
Right. Now, Liz, let's turn our attention to what is touted to be the happiest place on earth, Disneyland. Now, Disneyland in Shanghai reopened today. What was the turnout like? Is the public worried that it could be a fresh source of cases?
Well, so clearly the happiest place on earth is starting to be happy, but not quite happy again. So what they've been told by authorities is that they can only have up to 30% of capacity when they reopen. So Disneyland has said last week that they have a capacity of 24,000 visitors a day, and which means the maximum capacity now that they're reopening would be 8,000. But clearly the park has said that they are capping that at much lower, and they would gradually ramp it up towards 8,000. So it seems from pictures and images that we're seeing, people are coming, the crowds are not staying away. But this is theme park with COVID characteristics, which means that when you go in, you don't just get your ticketing checked, you also have your temperature checked. And if you were to take any of the rides that require the sort of bars that are like a harness sort of thing that you have to grab onto, you must wear gloves before going on board, and of course everyone is in a mask. What I'm curious to see is whether or not Mickey Mouse comes out in a mask as well.
Well, we certainly would like to see that as well. Well, thank you so much, Liz, for the update, and as always, do stay safe. That was our China correspondent Elizabeth Law joining us live from Beijing. Let's go to Dylan Ang now for the other headlines across the globe.
Thanks, Haryanto and Olivia. China isn't the only nation possibly seeing another wave of coronavirus infections. Cases in Germany are rising again, just days after its leaders loosened restrictions. Last Wednesday, Chancellor Angela Merkel announced measures to restart social life and revive the economy. The Robert Koch Institute for Disease Control said that the reproduction rate had risen to 1.1. The number of infections is said to be growing when the number goes above 1. Across the causeway, Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin announced that Malaysia will extend its movement control order for 1 more month, until June 9th. The MCO was originally scheduled to end tomorrow and had already been extended thrice previously since it first took effect in March. With interstate travel remaining banned, Mr. Muhyiddin said people will not be allowed to cross states to celebrate upcoming festivals like Hari Raya Aidilfitri. But restrictions for assemblies in places of worship will be relaxed once SOPs are announced and put in place. And in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced a phased plan to ease the nationwide lockdown, whilst urging the public to stay alert. Starting this week, the government will begin actively encouraging people to return to work if they can't do so at home. Schools and shops remain scheduled to reopen on June 1st, as long as infection rates stay low.
We must stay alert. We must continue to control the virus and save lives.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on Sunday that the UK's coronavirus lockdown will not end yet, but he outlined plans to begin slowly easing measures that have closed much of the country's economy for 7 weeks.
This is not the time simply to end the lockdown this week. Instead, we're taking the first careful steps to modify our measures. And the first step is a change of emphasis that we hope that people will act on this week. We said that you should work from home if you can and only go to work if you must. We now need to stress that anyone who can't work from home, for instance, those in construction or manufacturing, should be actively encouraged to go to work, and we want it to be safe for you to get to work. So you should avoid public transport if at all possible, because we must and will maintain social distancing, and capacity will therefore be limited.
The UK government has faced criticism over its handling of the pandemic, and Johnson is wary of taking the brakes off too soon. Britain's coronavirus death toll of close to 32,000 is the second highest in the world, behind the United States.
You must obey the rules on social distancing, and to enforce those rules, we will increase the fines for the small minority who break them.
Johnson said he would set out further details to Parliament on Monday when a, quote, roadmap document will be published.
We've been through the initial peak, but it's coming down the mountain that is often more dangerous.
The Health Ministry has confirmed 486 new COVID-19 cases as of noon today. 2 of the new cases are Singaporeans and permanent residents. Migrant workers living in dormitories continue to make up the bulk of the remaining cases.
The lower number of cases today is partly due to fewer tests being processed at a testing laboratory. The lab is recalibrating its apparatus for one of the test kits. The full breakdown of today's new cases will be released later, and Singapore now has a total of 23,822 cases.
Meanwhile, 3 of the 4 cases found among the healthcare workers at the Singapore Expo Community Care Facility have been retested and found to be negative. One of them was a false positive. He was one of 33 such cases arising from a test kit error.
Some areas of the Singapore racecourse in Kranji will be converted into community recovery facilities to house infected foreign workers. These areas include the multi-storey car park as well as the sheltered arena at the STC Riding Centre, and they're expected to be ready by the end of this month.
A Singaporean man who allegedly left his home multiple times while on stay-home notice is now facing 4 charges under the Infectious Diseases Act. David Leong is also accused of an offence under the Infectious Diseases Covid-19 Stay Orders Regulations 2020. Teo, who isn't represented, told the court that he intends to plead guilty. His case has been adjourned to May 20th.
The direct school admission exercise for entrance to secondary schools and junior colleges in 2021 is moving online. The exercise opens tomorrow, and the interviews and selection process for shortlisted candidates will be conducted electronically at the applicant's primary school for secondary school applications and at the applicant's secondary school for JC application.
McNuggets and curry sauce lovers, if you don't already know, McDonald's resumed its delivery, takeaway and drive-through services today. But its dessert kiosks and McCafe counters remain closed.
Amid cost pressures from the circuit breaker, human resource experts believe that the foreign workforce could be the first group to be retrenched despite companies' best efforts to retain their foreign staff.
Excluding foreign domestic workers, around 1.15 million such foreigners are employed here, including those on employment passes, S passes and work permits. Here to discuss this is David Leong, who is the Managing Director of HR firm PeopleWorldwide Consulting. Hi David, now what jobs will be most heavily affected? Will it be especially hard for those in what's considered low-skilled occupations?
The industry is quite impacted by this COVID-19. Very obviously, the first to the call would be the aviation industry. People are not flying, planes are all docked, airports are not operating. Places like our places of interest, the retail mall, our RWS, our casinos are all impacted. So jobs like that will be impacted at the front. So service-related jobs will be severely affected with this current COVID-19.
I see. So, David, there are foreign worker levy rebates and waivers in place to help companies retain these workers, but the key job support scheme of wage subsidies covers only local employees. Does this mean that the government should implement similar schemes for foreign employees as well? But, doing that, is that realistic?
It's not sustainable because we did once where the Ministry of Manpower supported the employer with levy rebate of $750 per worker for work permit and S-Pass. And that cost our government something to the tune of $675 million. And if that is to continue, it will eat into our taxpayer money. And on an ongoing basis, it is not a sustainable program for us to hold on to so many foreign workers. So post-COVID-19, there will be a serious restructuring of the foreign worker labor workforce in Singapore. So as of now, everything is on circuit breaker mode. Workers are not going out to work. So in this period, we have seen 280,000 of our construction workers out of action. We see workplace being very quiet. So this is a restive period. But when the CB is gradually opening up, we will see people coming back to work. But I would suspect that a lot of employers would have to let some of these foreign workers go.
And David, still on foreign workers. Now, some foreign workers are choosing to remain in their home countries, and that's left companies scrambling to replace their temporary manpower shortfall. Can they hire locals for the same jobs?
Now, we have to identify where are these sources. I think you are probably referring to the Malaysian. The Malaysian have freer movement between Singapore and Malaysia. So in this instance, there are a lot of Malaysians returning back to Malaysia and not staying with us in Singapore. Now, the other sources of where our foreign workers are coming in from, they are from India, they are from Philippines, they are from Bangladesh, they are from Myanmar. In this situation, a lot of our construction workers are from either India or Bangladesh. So these numbers would likely stay. For the traditional sources, the Malaysian, they are likely to be moving back. So we may have shortage of Malaysian workers in Singapore. But having said that, some of these numbers are not replaceable by Singaporeans. So employer will have to seriously struggle with managing with less right now.
Sorry, David, why do you say that some jobs are not replaceable by locals?
A lot of jobs are in the service industry. They could be retail shops, running the shops, or they could be in F&B. Most of our Singaporeans would not go into such trades. So if you go with job for job substitution, this will not work. The reason why we bring in these foreigners is because we don't have enough Singaporeans to do the job. Now we are asking the reverse. When the foreigner leaves, can Singapore replace them? The short answer is no, we cannot replace these numbers.
I see. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise, David. We've been speaking to David Leong, Managing Director of HR firm PeopleWorldwide Consulting.
Now moving on to some non-virus news, a 38-year-old man has died in a suspected murder along Punggol Field last night. When the police arrived, they found that the victim had been stabbed and injured badly.
He was sent to Sengkang General Hospital where he later died from his injuries. Anyone with information can call the police hotline at 1-800-255-0000. And for more on what's making the news, it's back to Dylan.
Thanks guys. Also in the news, IKEA will open its third outlet in Singapore next year at Gem Shopping Mall. It will be spread across 3 floors, offering the full range of products plus a restaurant. The new store will replace department store Robinsons, which will exit the mall this August. One of Singapore's most wanted criminals in the 1970s, Roland Ming, died of a heart attack in Denmark, where he'd been living since he fled Singapore in the late 1960s. Nicknamed Mr. Big in Denmark for his ties to organised crime and drug smuggling, he was wanted for the murder of Lam Cheng Siu in October 1969. The funeral of the 72-year-old Tan was live-streamed on Facebook to a close group of Singaporeans, including family, friends and gang members. Meanwhile, police said that 30 women and 19 men were arrested for their suspected involvement in vice activities. They were arrested during swoops on various premises, including at HDB estates, massage shops, condominiums and a hotel. The men were fined $300 each as they had left their homes for non-essential activity. A preliminary 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck Japan's eastern coast of Honshu early this morning at Ibaraki Prefecture, north of Tokyo. No tsunami warning was issued, and there were no immediate reports of damage or injuries. Back to you guys.
Music, like love, is equally important. And for Singaporean conductor Kahchun Wong and Marina Mahler, who's the granddaughter of renowned composer Gustav Mahler, they aim to share their love of music, classical music in particular, with children.
So with that aim in mind, they founded Project Infinitude, together with a child at Street 11, which is a charity and preschool for children from diverse and under-resourced backgrounds. The project provides an inclusive space for children to explore classical music.
To tell us more about this project, we are joined by the man himself, Kahchun Wong. Hi, Kahchun. Now, Kahchun,
Hello.
How did the idea to start Project Infinitude come about?
Well, this was in 2016. I've just won the Mahler competition in May in that year, and I've got to know Marina Mahler a little bit better. And so while we were just talking about how classical music is developing in Asia, one of the very common threads that we have been bringing up over and over again was the fact that there is a lot of interest right now within Southeast Asia for classical music, but at the same time, there is also this idea that classical music can be elitist, can be something that is out of reach to normal Singaporeans, normal Asians. And so I think that is very untrue, because I myself come from a very, I would say, simple, humble family background. And because of a lot of instances that I have had very good luck that allowed me to meet important people that helped me with music, I thought this was also a right moment for me to pass this on, to open a similar window of opportunity, really something for young children, especially from under-resourced backgrounds.
Now, of course, for those of you who are watching us, to find out more about Project Infinitude, you can watch the 7-part digital series, Why Music Matters. The episodes air every Thursday on the Straits Times website and social media channels.
Kahchun, let's move on to another endeavor of yours. As a mark of global solidarity during the COVID-19 outbreak, you assembled local and overseas artists to put on a virtual performance of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. And this 3-minute music video was aired on the Straits Times YouTube and Facebook channels last Thursday. So how was the reception for that?
Well, I think all of us never expected to be so supported by our audiences, by our viewers. We're very grateful for that. But at the same time, I have to really preface this entire discussion by saying that I am personally very, very grateful to my musicians, because these musicians coming from Singapore, but also the rest of the world, have all basically generously contributed their own time and effort into putting this together. And to say that now Singapore is almost like a kind of international musical kampong, where then we have musicians from Nuremberg, which is where my orchestra is, but from the London Phil, from Minnesota, from Thailand, from the Thailand Philharmonic, from Japan Philharmonic. All these musicians are coming now digitally in the video, playing side by side along the best Singaporean young artists here we have. It is a kind of kampong, ideal kind of musical kampong, which I've always wanted to have. There is the idea of multi-generations playing together. You have the young and old. You have inclusion and diversity. Because of this project, I spent quite a bit of time learning Singapore Sign Language, and I've been actually quite infatuated with learning more about this very special way of communicating. But at the same time, we also have East and West, tradition and innovation. And in many ways, isn't this the Singaporean story? So I'm quite happy we've been part of this, and I think there's going to be more to come.
Yeah, and Kahchun, on that note, we understand that apart from it being a tribute to Beethoven's work, it is also a part of a global campaign. Tell us more about that.
2020 is Beethoven's 250th birthday, and orchestras, arts organizations worldwide have planned huge celebrations for his music. But I would imagine at least until the end of summer, a big half of this year, a lot of events would have to be postponed. And so I thought this would be actually a great moment to say that not only these musicians that I've asked around the world to join, we don't want just to restrict it to this little club of ours. We think that the Ode to Joy deserves to be heard and sung by music lovers all around the world. And so there is now this campaign going on where anyone can submit a video of themselves singing the Ode to Joy. And when I say sing, it's really figuratively, because if someone says, I actually don't know German, I don't like to sing, but I like to hum, I like to whistle the melody, I like to play an instrument, or I like to just play some percussion instruments and beat along to the tune. Any submission would be possible, and we want to welcome anyone from the world to send in their entries, which we will then piece together into sort of a gigantic musical kampong orchestra choir around the world.
Well, thanks so much, Kahchun. That was Singaporean conductor Kahchun Wong, and he was speaking about the global campaign to invite people from around the world to send in short musical submissions for Ode to Joy. And if you want to be part of his Kampong Orchestra, you can find out more details in this link. It's also in the description below. If you're watching us on YouTube, the deadline for submissions is May the 31st.
Those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, do visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.